I remember the exact moment it all began. It was a rainy Tuesday, the kind that soaks your jeans from the ankles up before you've even locked your front door. The streetlights hadn't flickered on yet, but the sky was already a bruised shade of violet. I was standing at the corner of Melrose and Ashford, waiting for the crosswalk light, when I noticed a woman across the street staring at me, not in the casual, passing way, but with her entire body turned toward me, her expression locked in this frozen mix of horror and recognition. She didn't blink. She didn't move. My stomach twisted. Then the light changed. I stepped forward. So did she. We passed each other in the middle of the intersection. I turned to look back. She was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the image of her face, pale, strained, and trembling like she had seen something unholy. Her eyes had widened at me like I was a ghost. But what haunted me more was the way something inside me agreed, like a whisper deep in my chest said, "Yes, you've done this before." The feeling didn't leave the next morning. It followed me into my apartment kitchen, where the kettle shrieked like a warning instead of a call for tea. I poured the water, missed the mug completely, and spilled it over my hand. The burn didn't shock me. I stared at the scalding water on my skin and thought, this has happened before too. Over the next few days, the déjà vu intensified. I began finishing people's sentences without meaning to. I knew what song would play next on the radio, even when it was on shuffle. One morning, I reached for my phone just before it rang, the caller ID glowing with my sister's name. I answered with, "You're about to tell me about the nightmare again." There was silence on the line, then a shaken whisper. "How did you know?" She had dreamed of me in a burning hallway. My skin was peeling. I was screaming for her to run. She told me it felt too real. I told her she was just tired, but deep down, I was scared. One night, I took a different route home from work, hoping to shake off the familiarity that had begun to stalk me like a shadow. I found myself on a quiet street I didn't recognize, lined with townhouses that looked nearly identical. There was a flickering porch light at the end of the road. That's when I saw her again. The same woman from the intersection. She was standing motionless in the center of the sidewalk, drenched by the rain, staring at me with that same wide-eyed horror. She raised her hand slowly and pointed directly at me. Then she mouthed something. "Don't trust the walls." When I blinked, she was gone again. I ran the rest of the way home, my breath ragged, heart hammering. I locked every door, checked every window. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the dark felt like it had been scheduled, as if my apartment had a script it was following. At 2:13 a.m. exactly, my hallway light flickered. I hadn't turned it on. At 3:07 a.m., there was a knock on my front door. A soft, measured knock. 3 times. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, listening. Then, as if pulled by something ancient and irresistible, I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. No one was there. The next day, I confronted my landlord. I asked if anyone else had reported strange experiences in the building. He laughed, then saw my face and stopped. Slowly, he nodded. "There was someone before you, man in his 40s. Said he felt like he was repeating days, like he was being watched by the building itself. He moved out after 6 weeks. I asked for his name. The landlord hesitated, then he said, "I don't remember, but you remind me of him." That night I found a hidden panel behind my bedroom wardrobe. Inside was a VHS tape. It had my apartment number written on it, #3B. I don't even own a VHS player, but my neighbor, An elderly woman who rarely left her place did. I asked to borrow it. She smiled strangely and said, "You're the third person who's asked to borrow this." The tape showed a man pacing the very apartment I lived in. He looked restless, paranoid, and exhausted. The footage was dated 6 years ago. Then he stopped, looked directly into the camera, even though it was hidden, and whispered, "You're not going crazy. They built this place on memory." I began noticing the cracks, not physical ones, but time cracks. Moments where the second hand on my wall clock froze for a beat too long. Times when I would enter the bathroom and come out feeling like I had been inside for hours, even though my watch said 3 minutes. And dreams. God, the dreams. Always the same corridor. A light at the end. A copy of me walking ahead, then turning, screaming soundlessly as something pulled it back into the dark. Every time I woke up, I had nosebleeds. I tried to leave, packed my bags, called a cab, told no one, but every road led back to the same street, different route, same result. It was like the world outside my block had become a looping film reel. Even my phone's GPS started spinning, refusing to settle. At 11:42 p.m, I arrived at my apartment again, confused, panicked. The lights inside were already on. I hadn't left them that way. I opened the door and found myself standing in the hallway many times. Behind him, the walls began to breathe. I swear to you, the drywall pulsed, inhaled, exhaled. Pictures fell off the walls. The lights exploded. I screamed, he screamed. One of us ran, I don't know who. Then it all went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the sidewalk at Melrose and Ashford. It was raining. The light changed. A man crossed the intersection toward me. I stared at him. He looked just like me. It started on a Thursday. Mark had been driving back from a business seminar in Portland. The sun had dipped low behind the pines that bordered the winding mountain road, casting long, flickering shadows across the asphalt. It wasn't his first time on this stretch of highway, but something about it felt oddly practiced, as if his hands already knew every curve before it came. At first, he thought nothing of it. Déjà vu happened, but this time, it wasn't just a passing feeling. It rooted itself into his bones. Mark turned down the radio and leaned forward, his eyes narrowing on the road. Every sign, every tree, even the faint buzz of the same song looping in his head. It all repeated with a rhythm that made his pulse quicken. He shook his head, trying to dismiss it, but when his GPS flickered and the same turn showed up 3 times in the past 5 minutes, his grip tightened on the steering wheel. Something was wrong. Night had swallowed the road whole. Mark's headlights cut through the mist like dull knives. Then, out of nowhere, a woman appeared, standing dead center. He slammed on the brakes, heart rocketing into his throat. The car screeched, tires howling as he swerved to the shoulder. She didn't move, just stared wide-eyed, pale skin catching the light like porcelain. Mark scrambled out, breath ragged, shouting, "Are you all right? What the hell are you doing out here?" But she said nothing. Instead, she tilted her head and whispered, almost too faintly to hear, "You've been here before." Mark's nerves were frayed. He drove another 20 minutes until he saw it. A faded neon sign buzzing over a worn-out roadside motel. No name, just a blinking vacancy. Desperate for rest and answers, he pulled in. The lobby was dim, lit only by a yellowing desk lamp. A man in a dusty sweater greeted him without lifting his eyes. "I need a room, just for the night." The man slid over a key without a word. Number 7 carved into the wooden tag. Mark frowned. There was something familiar in the way the man moved, in the way the key felt in his palm. But again, the feeling of déjà vu pressed on his brain like a migraine. He found his room, collapsed onto the bed, and stared at the ceiling. That's when he heard the knock. It was slow, measured. 3 knocks, then silence. Mark sat up, pulse thudding in his ears. He walked to the door and peeked through the peephole. Nothing, but as he turned, there it was again. 3 knocks. He flung the door open. The hallway was empty. Cold air wrapped around him like a warning. He stepped back inside. Then the phone rang. He picked it up, expecting the front desk. But instead, a whisper. Low, hollow, distant. "Don't forget, you've done this already." Mark paced the room, every inch of his skin crawling. The curtains fluttered through the windows were shut. The carpet pattern, the same one he dreamed about a week ago, or thought he had. And the painting above the bed, a forest at dusk, looked disturbingly like the one he'd just driven through. He opened the drawer beside the bed. A notebook sat inside. Not a Bible, not a phone book, just a leather-bound journal. On the cover, in his own handwriting, "For when you forget again." He flipped it open. The first page was blank. Then, as he turned further, words began to fill the pages like echoes of thoughts he never remembered writing. "You'll feel it before you know. The road, the woman, the knock. You'll think you're dreaming, but you're not. It's a loop. You're stuck, Mark. You've always been stuck. And you keep forgetting." Mark dropped the book. Sweat clung to his back. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Every breath felt heavy now. The mirror across the room caught his reflection. But it wasn't right. He was standing still, but in the mirror, he swore his reflection leaned forward. The reflection's eyes were wide, unblinking. Mark stared at it, heart pounding, trying to convince himself it was just a trick of the light. But then, his reflection smiled. Mark stumbled back, knocking over the chair. He looked again. Normal, just him. Shaking hands, bloodshot eyes. His phone buzzed. One message. Time's almost up. He didn't remember putting that number in, but he called it. A voice picked up, his own voice. "You left me here. I waited. You said you'd break the cycle, but you're just as weak every time." Mark ran out of the room, down the hall, past doors that looked the same. No windows, no exits, just corridor after corridor. The lights flickered overhead like a countdown. Then, at the end of the hallway, her, the woman from the road. She raised a hand and pointed behind him. Mark turned. Room 7. Again. Same door. Same chipped paint. Same rust on the knob. "You've never left," she said. "You only start over." His knees buckled. "No, I left. I got out. I remember the drive." "You remember the illusion," she replied, "but the truth is always waiting for you here." Mark's head spun. He opened the door. Inside, himself. Sitting on the bed, reading the journal, mouth slightly open in confusion. The same exact moment he'd just lived. Again, he screamed. Mark realized what the woman meant. He hadn't just been here before. He never left. Each reset erased the last. only leaving behind a whisper, a flicker, an echo. He had warned himself, over and over, but he never remembered in time. The journal was his scream into the void, and the void always answered the same way, with silence and a loop. He sat back down, picked up the pen, and began writing again. You'll feel it before you know. It began with a flicker, not of light, but of memory, or something like it. Nathan stood at platform 7 of the old Renswick train station, clutching a warm paper cup of coffee, steam swirling in the chill morning air. He was waiting for the 6:42 a.m. to Marlington, a commute he'd taken every weekday for nearly a decade. But something was wrong this time. Something subtly, disturbingly wrong. He stared at the tracks, then at the rusted station clock above. A pang of dizziness struck him as the second hand clicked forward. Then came the flicker, a sharp, stinging pulse behind his eyes. The scent of burnt toast invaded his nostrils. He blinked hard. Across the platform, a woman in a green scarf turned her head toward him, her eyes wide with recognition. Or was it fear? Nathan's heart stumbled in his chest. He had never seen her before. He was sure of that. And yet, his brain screamed otherwise. The train arrived with a thunderous whoosh. Nathan boarded without thinking, taking his usual seat by the window. But the instant his body settled, a cold sweat broke out along his back. The man across from him, bald, mid-40s, grey coat, looked up from his paper and gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Rough morning, huh?" he said. Nathan's stomach dropped. Those exact words, that same expression. He had lived this moment before, not just once, but several times. His palms grew clammy as he gripped his coffee cup. He knew what would come next. The train would jerk slightly, then a child in the next row would spill juice and start to cry. It happened, exactly as he remembered, but it wasn't a memory. It couldn't be. Nathan had never met these people. He had never ridden this specific train on this specific day. By the time he reached his office, Nathan was visibly shaken. He tried to tell himself it was stress, midlife pressure, too much caffeine. But as he stepped into the glass lobby of Donnelly and Hart, the déjà vu struck again, harder this time. The receptionist, Chloe, looked up with a startled expression. "Mr. Delmar, didn't you just come in?" she asked, visibly confused. Nathan froze. "What do you mean?" he asked. Chloe's brow furrowed. "You walked in like 10 minutes ago. Same coat, same coffee cup. I even said good morning and you smiled, but you didn't say anything. You just stared at the elevators." Nathan stumbled back slightly, feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. He had no recollection of that. None. Upstairs in his office, everything seemed normal, until he saw the post-it note on his monitor. 3 words, hastily scrawled in handwriting that was unmistakably his own. "Don't trust time." He backed away from the desk, his mind whirred like a machine trying to reboot. Did he write that? When? He scanned his calendar. 2 meetings were listed that he swore he never scheduled. One with a man named Dr. Seth Lorre. The name sparked nothing at first, but then another flicker. This time he remembered the man's face, but he remembered it before it came to him, like recalling a dream before waking up. Back home that evening, Nathan stood before the mirror in his bathroom. He leaned in, eyes locked with his own reflection, but it didn't feel like him. Something was slightly off. The reflection seemed half a second delayed, like a live stream buffering. Then it smiled, before he did. Nathan staggered back with a gasp. His wife, Jenna, rushed in, alarmed. "Nathan, what happened? You look pale as a ghost." He couldn't bring himself to answer. How do you tell someone that your reflection just moved independently? That time itself seems to be looping around you in silent whispers. Desperation drove him to keep the appointment with Dr. Seth Lorre. The office was buried beneath an old bookstore, the kind of place with yellowed pages and clocks that ticked slightly out of sync. Dr. Lorre was calm, too calm. "You're experiencing what's known as a temporal dissonance loop," he explained. "You're not remembering the past. You're remembering the next repetition." Nathan blinked at him. "That's impossible. Memories don't work like that." Dr. Lorre folded his hands. "Unless you're caught in a cycle, a loop, and something or someone is pulling the strings." Nathan's spine stiffened. He opened his mouth to speak, but Dr. Lorre held up a finger. "Next, you'll say you saw your reflection smile before you did." Nathan stared, speechless. That night, Nathan sat in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. The digital clock beside him blinked 2:37 am, then again, and again. The time wasn't moving. He reached over to his phone. Same time, no change. Then the room went dark. Lights off, phone dead, clock frozen. Silence. He got up slowly. The hallway light buzzed overhead, but the bulbs weren't on. The air grew heavier with each step. In the living room, the TV turned on by itself. Static. Then a frame flickered on screen. Nathan, sitting on the couch, watching himself. In real time. Nathan ran. Out the door, into the freezing night, barefoot and frantic. The streets were empty. Time felt thick, slow, elastic. Every breath steamed like smoke in the air. He reached the train station, desperate for something familiar, but the station had changed. Rusted signs missing, a new platform number. The schedule board read, "Arrival, 6:42 am, you were here." A voice behind him. Still trying to outrun it? It was the man from the train. He was older now, or maybe not. Maybe he never aged. Nathan turned, furious. "What is this? Why me?" The man smiled sadly. "You asked to remember, and now you do." Everything folded in. Lights, sounds, memories, overlapping like reflections in shattered glass. Nathan found himself back on the train again. Morning, coffee, platform 7. Same woman in the green scarf. Same clock. Same everything. But this time, he didn't board the train. He stood still as the world looped around him. The flicker hit, sharper, clearer. And in that moment, he understood. He wasn't living time. He was watching a recording. A memory loop burned onto his consciousness for reasons unknown. Trapped not by fate, but by choice. His own. And the worst part, he had no memory of ever making that choice.